Hi guys, I'm Mrs. Worley and I'm here to talk to you today about sight reading. So I know that sight reading can be a little difficult, especially when you are expected to do something on the spot, something you've never seen. So we're going to kind of break down ways that you can be successful in that audition room. To me, sight reading is practiced in two parts. So basically, part one would be your prep. This would be what you did at home. And then part two would be the tools and strategies that you just have that help you on the spot. So first, we're going to look at the at-home prep, right? And I know that some of us are like, but I don't even know what they're going to ask me. That's true. I mean, you don't know. But at the same time, there are things you could be doing at home that will help you when you get into the sight reading room. And that's those strategies. All right. So one of the first things we're going to look at would be scales and key signatures. This is a really huge part of sight reading. Because I know as a judge, when I go and I listen to auditions, when we get to that sight reading part, one of the things that stands out to me the most is, does a student understand the key signature? And if a student doesn't seem to understand that key signature, that's kind of a big indication that they may not be ready for that group. So one of the very first things you want to do when you're prepping for an audition is go and look at the scales they've asked you to play. Because, right, you're going to get in the room and they're going to choose one of those scales. And a lot of times, you know, they are often C, G, D, and F. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't ask you an A or an E, depending on your grade level. But my point here is when a ensemble group gives you a list of scales to know those scales inside and out. So don't kind of like brush them off, because it's going to come up later in the sight reading room. So the very first thing you want to do when prepping for your audition is look at the scales they gave you. Now, some of us work with private teachers, some of us don't. So I like to use a site online. It's called stringskills.com. And it has literally 1-octave scales, 2-octave scales, arpeggios, major scales, minor scales. It has a little bit of everything on there for everybody. So my suggestion first, go learn your scales. All right. And here's what that website looks like. I'll say it again. It's stringskills.com. All right, so if you look at that stringskills.com or any other book you have, you want to make sure that you fully understand the key signature and then the scale. So do you know what notes are altered, what notes are sharped, what notes are flat, natural? Are we using low twos? Are we using high twos? Are there the dreaded high threes, you know, or extensions? So that's really kind of what you have to know really, really, really well going into a sight reading room, are those key signatures. That's going to be a big deal when you're sitting there looking at the excerpt and you have to pull out, you know, a strategy from under your belt. Part of it's going to be, do you know the key signature? So that's the very first thing you're going to want to do. Know your scales inside, outside, inwards, backwards, you know, any way possible. You should know those scales. The second thing we're going to look at, that's going to be a huge deal in the sight reading room, will be rhythms. So if you're like me, this is probably the most overwhelming part of the sight reading room. I don't do well with rhythms. For me, I really have to hear a rhythm to fully understand it. You know, I'm not someone that can sit in a class and you could tell me that an eighth note is half of a beat and another eighth note is another half. And I'll be like, well, that's cool, but what does that sound like? So I have to know what a rhythm sounds like to fully understand it. So one thing that I have found that helps me with rhythm is I found this really great YouTube channel. It's by a guy named Sahir Galt. And he does these really great interactive videos. Okay, so if you look down, you'll see I've listed all the videos. There's simple rhythms and 2/4 time. There's complex rhythms. There's polyrhythms. But what I really like about his videos is he's not just kind of talking at me. He's showing, he's letting me hear it. And then he asks for me to interact with what he's doing. So like he'll explain a rhythm, he'll let you hear the rhythm, and then he invites you to kind of play along with him. And you can play it, you can tap it. But what I like most is you're getting the practice hearing the rhythm and then creating the rhythm. So I suggest your next step in prepping for sight reading is you go find those videos and you practice doing the rhythms with him. And for me, I did a combination of clapping, and then I did a combination of just playing open strings on my instrument. That really helped me immensely with preparing with rhythms. So once you feel comfortable doing that, you can get your instrument, which I have a viola with me today. I am normally a cellist, but I have my viola. And I like to basically start with the longest duration of rhythm and then kind of build using scales. So if I started with the C scale, and for the sake of time today, we're going to start with quarter notes, okay? So I'm going to play quarter notes first. Scale. And then I would go into my eighth note. So unlike this video, I wouldn't stop, I would keep going. So after I complete the scale on quarter notes, I'd come back and do eighth notes. And then I would switch into 16ths. And I'd keep doing that. And that's kind of a nice, easy way to kind of practice going from one rhythmic duration to another. And I know that in Sarasota Youth Orchestra and a lot of the groups, we actually do this together. It still applies at home. It works out really great at home. You can even do it with unusual or complex rhythms. So if you're someone that struggles with dotted quarter notes, well, then start with eighth notes, you know. And 2, and 1, and 2, and 1. So just kind of make up little rhythms to practice. Don't make it too difficult. So like right there, I only used eighth notes and dotted quarters, you know, like a 2-bar phrase, and practice going between the different rhythms. That's going to help immensely prepping you for that sight reading room. Okay, so that's how you're going to prep at home. Let's next talk about the strategies you're going to use on the spot when you get into the sight reading room. So we're going to move on to part 2, which is taking skills and strategies and using them in that sight reading room. So we've done all our practicing, we've reviewed our scales, we've been working with our rhythms. Now it's time for the sight reading. So for our purposes today, I'm going to be using stringskills.com again. If you go to the site, www.stringskills.com, they have a section called Crazy Tunes for Rhythmic Reading, and that's what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to first look at America Foxtrot. So if you want to pull that up yourself and you want to get it going, you can pause this video, find it, print it out, do what you need to do. But that's what I'm going to be looking at, so you can actually follow along with me today. So if we're looking at America Foxtrot, the very first thing we want to do before we dig in here is what? Does anyone know? Key signature. So we're going to locate that key signature. And if we look, our key signature is G major, because we've got that one sharp. So this automatically tells me I got to look out for C naturals. So if we look at the excerpt, we're going to scan really quickly and look for every C natural. So I see them in the first line, the second line, the third line. So we really have a lot of C naturals in there. So I'm just kind of going to look through, maybe kind of practice shadow play just to kind of make sure I know exactly where they are. Yeah, there is a lot in that second and third line. So we're aware of it. We know. We're going to actually move on to time signature. Okay. So it's in 4/4. Easy peasy, right? Nothing too tricky there with the time signature. Let's look and see, are there any rhythms that may be a little difficult for us? I can think of 3. So one of the first things would be the rest, right? There's a lot of rest in this piece. So we just kind of want to make a mental note where those rests are. The second thing would be that tied G in the second line. So what I would do is I would basically kind of tap my foot. I would come up with a tempo that I'm comfortable with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, off, right? And I would kind of practice that rhythm. The next one that I see that's a little tricky would be the 8th notes in the third line. So I'm going to start at the beginning of the third line. I'm going to set my tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3 and 4 and 1, right? And if you weren't comfortable, you could do it again. Keep in mind, you don't get a lot of time in the sight reading room. So what I would do is I'd actually take my bow and I would shadow bow and shadow play and count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, rest. 2, 3, 4, 1, 3 and 4 and. 3 and 4 and. So I might just kind of practice that, and I should have no question about what it should sound like because I've been practicing and prepping prior to this. So I already kind of know that conversion. I know what it sounds like going from a quarter note to the 8th note. At this point, if you have any time left in your prep, I suggest you shadow play, and you can shadow play and sizzle. So for instance, I'm going to actually start at circle 1 because I feel like circle 1 I need to look at again because that's where all the C naturals are. So I'm going to go 1, right? And if you're wondering what sound I'm making, that was me sizzling because I like to hear it and feel it, which can be really useful. So I've kind of looked at everything. They call times up and now we're ready to play. So before you start playing, okay, make sure you're in a tempo that you feel comfortable with, okay? Now you don't want to play so slow that it hurts you, right? If you look at America Foxtrot, it's 160. I, as a judge, feel that certain tempo modifications can be made as long as they do not deter from the overall sound of the piece. Meaning if you need to go a little lower than 160, cool. However, you can't be going like 60 when it says 160. So if you need to go a little slower, all right. but you need to go a tempo that you feel comfortable in, that you will be the most successful in. So normally the tempo that you practiced it in is the tempo you need to go. So I basically was on this tempo, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And this is what we practiced. I'm not going to change it, right? So when they tell me I can play, that's the tempo I'm going to go because that's the tempo I practiced at. So when you're practicing right there in the sight reading room, make sure you're practicing at a tempo that you feel confident in, that's not going to make you feel flustered. All right? So those are my suggestions for you. I hope it helps you out and that you have a really successful sight reading. I look forward to seeing you all in the fall, and good luck.